All right, so welcome back, everyone. I hope that you're all having a great Thursday. And the video that you are going to watch today focuses more on the writer reflection portion of your A4 portfolio. So on Tuesday, we talked a little bit more about the learner reflection component, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about the writer reflection piece, which deals with course outcomes, which we started to talk about at the end of the day on Tuesday. And I have pulled up here the December 3rd page in modules, which details everything that was due for today, as well as our objectives, the classwork that you'll need to complete by Thursday at midnight, and some additional materials as well as your homework for next time. So just to kind of talk you through the actual classwork, as I think that getting a sense of how all of these things fit will be helpful. All of these tasks kind of tie into your A4. You'll want to start, if you haven't already, by reviewing your peers' discussion post from Tuesday. So maybe taking a minute, just reading through a few, and then respond to two classmates from whom you either relate to their experience or you learned from their experience. Let them know how their experience influences the way you look at your own. So again, this is one of those activities that we would have done early on in the semester where we're really just taking a moment to compare perceptions and experiences, right? Just to kind of push us to maybe further investigate our own and to be aware of the wide range of perspectives. So that is kind of the first piece. Once you've done that, we're going to engage in some additional metacognitive writing. And this prompt is going to be a little bit more focused than the last prompt that we engaged with for Tuesday's class, as it's asking you to look at specific tasks that we completed in class. And by tasks, I mean anything from some type of group work that was completed to a reading, to a discussion, to a peer review, any of these things, right? So it's asking you to reflect a little bit more specifically than the initial assignment on Tuesday. And this is going to lend itself really nicely to your writer reflection, because your writer reflection is asking you to speak specifically to your involvement in the course. So I am not necessarily going to read through all of these because they are there for you and you can read them. But I would say it would make sense to take maybe 15 minutes, if not maybe a little bit less, to complete these. The more ideas you generate here, the more you're going to be able to kind of recall specifics when you're thinking about the brainstorm that we're going to be doing at the end of class today, as well as your own writer reflection, where you'll need to access and speak to specific activities. I think the most important thing to think of here is the way that activities can be defined, right? Because sometimes we have a really specific idea of what activity means. Really, it's just, anything that we have accomplished in class. I would stay away from the bigger assignments and think more of like the smaller things that we did to achieve those larger assignments. So now that we've gone through what is leading up to this and why, I want to take a moment to return to the assignment sheet that we looked at last class, and just kind of remind you about how this all fits together. So we will be getting to the revision plan next week. This week we're focusing on your reflection. And just as a reminder, we talked a little bit more about the learner growth piece last class, and the fact that it's a little bit broader. You're speaking more to the experiences that you've had this semester, and you're using some of those prompts from the initial reflection that we did to guide your responses. So this will be roughly a page. I don't have any preference as to whether you start with writing growth or start with learner growth, whatever seems to make the most sense to you. So we also looked at an example paragraph of learner growth, and you have a strong example of the entire essay. So I think we did what we needed to with this piece. Writing growth, though, is going to be a little bit more involved because it's asking you to speak to specific course outcomes. And I'm just going to kind of quickly read through this one more time just so we can remind ourselves of what we're doing. You're going to choose 2 of the course outcomes from the syllabus to discuss your growth or need for growth in the skills we've worked on in this semester. Consider the benefit of focusing on concepts and objectives which are different from the ones that you discuss below. And then in each paragraph, you're going to want to do the following. Identify the outcome and summarize the way that you interacted with it this semester, which means that you'll need to understand the outcomes, which is why that's kind of where we started, what we started to work on at the end of Tuesday's class. Include at least one example from your classwork, readings, homework, or writing assignments to demonstrate what you've learned, how you were challenged, and or how you improved. So the brainstorm writing we just did, you can draw from that potentially to provide these examples, and then explain your observations about how you see yourself approaching these skills in future classes or outside of academia. Okay, so returning then, and again, this provides you with a sort of an organizational structure, right? That should make sense. You're identifying your point, you are using examples, referencing examples, and you are explaining the relevance of those examples. So as a reminder, let's also return to course outcomes and just kind of give ourselves a quick definition of that. Course outcomes or learning outcomes are statements that describe significant and essential learning that learners have achieved and can reliably demonstrate at the end of a course or program. In other words, learning outcomes identify what the learner will know and be able to do by the end of the course or program. And then we have here a list of course outcomes. So for homework for today, you were all assigned a specific outcome, and you were asked to paraphrase it in your own words, because I wanted you to kind of go through that process of working through the definitions and thinking about how these ideas potentially apply to what we've actually done in class. And if we had all the time in the world, we would probably spend a little bit more time going through these and breaking them down. But because it's more important to me that you are able to think about how these ideas apply to your work than it is that you are able to translate them, I have actually gone ahead and created some paraphrased outcomes of my own that I hope will allow you to kind of figure out which ones you want to focus on. As a reminder, while these outcome paragraphs are categorically linked, when you are writing your writer reflection, you do want to focus specifically on the one of these specific kind of bullets or lowercase letters, right? So just to, we don't have time to read through all of them, and I would recommend you going through and kind of trying to figure out which ones make the most sense to you and which ones can you speak to the most clearly, right? Because some are just going to pop out at you as yeah, I know exactly where we did that. I know how I engaged with it, and some might just feel a little bit foggier, which is totally fine. So just though to give you a little bit of a categorical understanding of these different groups. And this is a little tricky because all of these categories overlap in different ways, but anything that we did in relation to the rhetorical triangle when we were looking specifically at audience, genre, author, purpose, and context, and considering how that might shape a text and the effectiveness of a text, or how it might shape our own writing. Any of those kind of smaller activities that really looked at those rhetorical components probably fit under this category. It doesn't mean that they wouldn't fit under other categories as well, because oftentimes there were multiple skills happening at one time. But that's one way to kind of define this category. I would say this category has a lot more to do with just the actual act of writing, right? The writing that we did as process work, the writing that we did when we were offering each other peer reviews and looking at one another's writing, and the writing that we are doing to reflect on our thinking and learning. This category is always a little bit tricky, this third one, but it tends to relate, I think, a lot to the generation of ideas, right? So, so the kind of ways in which you might have navigated your own point of view and synthesizing your own point of view with other sources, thinking about how to consider context when making a statement, and to also consider what impact your claim might have on others. So ultimately, I think a lot of the work that we did in A2 and A3 would fall under this category. I think this category really speaks for itself. I don't think I necessarily need to go into depth, but it has mostly to do with source evaluation, which we focused on as we were moving into A2. And then this one, I would say, relates a lot to maybe anything that we did that connected to genre conventions, and really kind of just trying to figure out what those stylistic choices were that were associated with different genres, but also thinking about some of the specific expectations of research writing, right? Like MLA and you know, the way that the university looks at plagiarism and how and the sort of tone of an academic argument. So ultimately, I hope that this helps to clarify some of these ideas for you. If you have specific questions about specific course outcomes, definitely reach out to me. I'm happy to walk through them with you. I have two more things that I want to talk you through before our time is up. So now that we've kind of identified these different course outcomes, we've done some reflecting on our Google Doc, on our engagement with different activities throughout the semester. What I want you to do is to identify one task that you completed or did or engaged with, which pushed you to engage with this category. Okay, so it should be something that relates to one of these three things. You don't have to write a task for each one. You just have to write a task for the category, but you should let me know whether you're referring to A, B, or C. Okay, so you'll need to include what the task was. You'll need to include what letter it's associated with, just so that I have a sense of how well you understand these different pieces. And you need to also include your name so that I know who has written what. So each person should try to come up with one task for each of these categories. And this should allow us to really bounce some ideas off of one another. And just so that you can be reminded of how all of this ties together, what you are doing in your writer growth section is you are picking two of the course outcomes, meaning two of those lowercase letter lines, right? You're identifying it, you're including at least one example from your classwork that relates to it, and you're explaining how it impacts the way you will approach it in the future. You also have a strong example, and the first two paragraphs here are kind of demonstrate how this can be done effectively. All right, I think that's all for today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, good luck with the work.